There is a company on a blacklist, not a metaphorical blacklist, a real one. The United States Entity List, added on January 16, 2025, with a presumption of denial on every export it touches. The official message was simple. This company is cut off. No advanced chips, no American tools, no access. It was supposed to be a slow death sentence for a Chinese AI lab. 19 months later, that same lab shipped a model that just did something no open weights model has ever done. Today, August 14, 2026, Zhipu AI, the company that grew out of Tsinghua University research, released GLM-5.3. And the numbers in the release notes read like a provocation: 84.5 on CyberGym, scoring above Mythos 5 and above GPT-5.6 Sol. Number 1 among open source models on Terminal Bench 3.0. Number 1 on Agent's last exam, a 50% improvement in programming capability over its predecessor. And here is the number that should make every security engineer on Earth put down their coffee. Working with security teams in China, this model found 2,436 real vulnerabilities across 269 projects, some of them up to 40 years old. Bugs that human engineers, maintainers, auditors, and every automated scanner on Earth had missed for 4 decades. This model found them. That is not a metaphor. That is just the registry. If you want to understand how a sanctioned lab with no access to American silicon just claimed the crown for open coding models, and what it means when AI starts finding 40-year-old bugs, hit subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel bring you more stories like this one. Let's get into it. To understand why GLM-5.3 matters, you need to understand the 2 walls that separated Chinese AI from the frontier for the last 3 years. And to be fair, both walls were real. Wall 1. Cybersecurity. This was the gap everyone agreed on. Chinese open models could write code. They could build front ends, fix bugs, pass SW bench. But when it came to security reasoning, finding vulnerabilities, chaining exploits, thinking like an attacker, they consistently lagged the American frontier models. The Western labs had spent years training their models on security-specific data, on capture-the-flag environments, on vulnerability databases. Cybersecurity was considered the last honest moat, the one place where the closed American models were unambiguously ahead. Wall 2. The sanctions architecture. Zhipu AI was added to the U.S. Entity List in January 2025. That means any export of American origin technology to the company requires a license, and that license comes with a presumption of denial. In plain language, no advanced NVIDIA GPUs through official channels, no American EDA tools, no cloud access. The entire point of the Entity List is to freeze a company's compute trajectory. A frozen compute trajectory should mean a frozen model trajectory. That was the theory, and for a while the theory held. Through 2025, the open weights world watched the closed American frontier pull ahead. Claude Opus 4.6, then 4.7, then 4.8, GPT-5.5, then 5.6. The open models, including Zhipu's own GLM line, were always chasing. GLM-5.1 scored at 94.6% of Claude Opus 4.6's coding performance. Impressive, but 94.6% of the leader is still second place. The dismissive nickname for Chinese open models in Western AI circles was benchmark followers. The assumption was that they could optimize for public benchmarks, but they could not originate capability. They could close the gap on tasks that were measured. They could not lead on tasks that required genuine reasoning, like multi-stage exploitation. Security was the proof. Chinese models could not hack. End of story. This felt like a problem with no real solution for a sanctioned lab. You cannot buy your way to the frontier when every purchase is denied. You cannot copy your way there when the frontier is closed source. So the only path left was to find a different route to the same destination, until Zhipu decided that the frontier was not where everyone thought it was. So here is the question. If the gap was in security reasoning and agentic coding, why did not some open lab just train for it? Why did it take a blacklisted Chinese company to ship the strongest open coding model? The answer is that the entire open weights ecosystem was optimizing the wrong variable, and the wrong variable was pre-training. For years, the dominant belief in AI was that capability lives in the base model. You train 1 trillion tokens, you scale the parameters, you get the brain. Everything after that, the fine-tuning, the reinforcement learning, the post-training, was considered cosmetics. Makeup on top of the real intelligence. The big labs spent hundreds of millions of dollars on pre-training runs because that is where the capability was believed to be born. And that belief created 3 specific, concrete weaknesses in the open weights world. Weakness 1. The compute trap. Pre-training is the most expensive step in AI. A frontier pre-training run costs hundreds of millions of dollars in electricity and GPUs. For a sanctioned company cut off from the most efficient chips, a new pre-training run at frontier scale is nearly impossible. So the open world assumed that a sanctioned lab simply could not produce a frontier model. The math seemed to forbid it. Weakness 2. The data illusion. Everyone assumed that to get good at security, you needed massive curated security datasets, vulnerability databases, exploit repositories, labeled examples. But those datasets are small, noisy, and saturated. Every model has already seen them. Training on them teaches a model to recognize known bugs, not to discover unknown ones. Recognition is not discovery. Weakness 3. The agent gap. Real security work is not a single prompt. It is a loop. You probe a system, you read the response, you form a hypothesis, you probe again, 10, 20, 50 steps deep. Open models historically fell apart in long loops. They forgot the goal. They repeated failed commands. They hallucinated file paths. The dismissive framing was open models cannot hold a thought for 50 steps. And in security, 50 steps is the minimum. So the open world kept throwing compute at pre-training, kept recycling the same vulnerability datasets, and kept losing to closed models on anything agentic. The Western labs, meanwhile, kept their post-training pipelines secret because they knew, long before the open world admitted it, that the last mile of capability is built after the base model is RN. Zhipu figured out that secret the expensive way. And then they did something almost insulting in its simplicity. They did not retrain the brain. They re-educated it. Here is the twist. And this is the part that changes everything about how capability is built. GLM-5. shares the exact same base model as its predecessor, GLM-5. 2. The same architecture, the same pre-training, the same weights out of the pre-training run, a mixture of experts model in the 743 billion parameter class. Nothing changed at the base. Every single gain in GLM-5. 3 comes from extended post-training alone. Read that again. The strongest open weights coding model, according to its own benchmarks, was not born smarter. It was trained smarter after birth. The capability was not in the pre-training. It was in the education. Let me walk through the mechanism, step by step, because the elegance is in what they built after the base model existed. Step 1. Environments, not datasets. Instead of feeding the model labeled vulnerability examples, Zhipu built live environments, real software projects, real code bases, real systems, and let the model attack them, not once, millions of times. With reinforcement learning scoring whether it actually broke in, whether the exploit actually worked, whether the vulnerability was real. The model was not taught what bugs look like. It was rewarded for finding bugs nobody had labeled. Step 2. Multi-stage exploitation chains. This is the capability Zhipu highlights, and it is the one that was supposed to be impossible for open models. According to the company, the model began to reason across multiple stages of exploitation, forming coherent plans for complete exploitation chains. In plain language, it does not just find one weak door. It finds a weak door, then realizes the room behind it has a vent, and the vent connects to a server, and the server trusts an old protocol, and the protocol leaks a key. It chains small, individually harmless weaknesses into one complete path to the crown jewels. That is not pattern matching. That is planning across 50 steps. The agent gap did not get fixed. It got closed by training the reward signal on entire chains, not single moves. Step 3. The coding loop. The same post-training pipeline was applied to agentic coding, terminal tasks, long horizon engineering, multi-file refactors. The model lives inside an agent harness, executes commands, reads errors, retries. It is trained on the loop, not the answer. That is why the biggest jumps are in agent-based tasks. And here is the brilliant part. The 3 old weaknesses of open models, the compute trap, the data illusion, the agent gap, they do not get fixed. They disappear. The compute trap disappears because post-training costs a fraction of pre-training. You do not need a sanctioned lab to own a frontier pre-training cluster. You need it to own a good base and a brutal education. The data illusion disappears because the environments generate infinite fresh training signal. Every failed exploit attempt is a lesson, no human labeling required. The agent gap disappears because the model was never trained outside the loop to begin with. The substrate changed. The capability moved from the birth to the upbringing, and the numbers that fell out of that reframe are the ones from the hook. A 50% improvement in programming capabiliity over GLM-5. 2 in Zhipu's internal evaluation. Number 1 among open-source models on Terminal Bench 3. 0. Number 1 on Agent's last exam, the command line benchmark. 84.5 on CyberGym, above Mythos 5, above GPT-5.6 Sol. For context on the lineage, GLM-5. 2 already posted 81.0 on Terminal Bench against its predecessor's 63.5 and held a 1 million token lossless context. The base was already strong. The education made it dangerous, but self-reported benchmarks are one thing. Field results are another. And this is where the story stops being a model card and becomes a security event. Zhipu put GLM-5.3 to work with security teams in China. Not on toy challenges, on real, live, maintained open-source projects. The result, 2,436 vulnerabilities discovered across 269 projects. Some of those flaws are up to 40 years old. Think about what 40 years means. That is code written in the 1980s, code that has been compiled, deployed, audited, patched, forked, and maintained by generations of human engineers. Code that survived every static analyzer, every fuzzer, every penetration test, every pair of expert eyes that ever touched it. And a model that did not exist 2 years ago read it and said, "Here, this is wrong. This is how you break in." The flaws are documented in a public registry. That is the checkable part. That is not a benchmark. That is a paper trail that any security researcher on Earth can go read today. Now look at the deployment layer, because it contains the single most delicious irony of the entire AI race. GLM-5.3 is available now through the GLM coding plan, and it works inside coding agents, Z-Code, OpenCode, Dot, and Claude Code. Yes, the agent harness built by Anthropic, one of the most guarded closed model companies in America, can now be powered by a blacklisted Chinese open model. The harness and the brain are separable, and the open brain just got strong enough to sit inside the closed harness. The stack is unbundling in public, and the open weights commitment is real. The model weights go open source in 2 weeks, once security reviews wrap. 2 weeks, that is the timeline between proprietary frontier and anyone on Earth can download the strongest open coding model. Now zoom out to the institutional layer. This is not a garage startup. Zhipu evolved from Tsinghua University research, one of the deepest engineering talent pipelines on the planet. It survived being added to the US Entity List on January 16, 2025, with a presumption of denial. And instead of freezing, it shipped GLM-5, then 5.1, then 5.2, then 5.3. A model cadence of roughly 1 meaningful release per quarter while under sanctions. The lineage's public record. GLM-5 at 77.8% on SWE Bench Verified, 92.7 on AIM 2026. GLM-5.2 beating GPT-5.5 on real bug fix and long horizon benchmarks, and beating Claude Code on cyber benchmarks at roughly 17 cents per vulnerability found. And now 5.3, claiming the open crown. Every quarter, the post-training gets sharper. Every release, the gap to the closed frontier shrinks. This is happening right now, today, in 2026. The entity list was supposed to freeze the trajectory. It only froze the excuses. But here is the honest part of this story. And I want to be straight with you, because this format does not do blind hype. First, the 50% programming improvement is from Zhipu's own internally built subjective evaluation. That is a self-reported number on a self-built rubric. The public, checkable claims are the benchmark rankings. Terminal Bench 3.0, Agent's Last Exam, CyberGym, and those still need independent reproduction on open weights before the crown is official. The weights arrive in 2 weeks. The verification arrives after that. Until then, the crown is claimed, not certified. Second, the same base means the same ceiling on raw knowledge. Post-training can unlock capability, but it cannot add factual knowledge that was never pre-trained. On knowledge-heavy and pure reasoning fronts, The closed frontier models that trained on vastly larger corpora still hold advantages. GLM-5, 2 trailed Opus 4, 8 on several benchmarks, and 3 does not change the base underneath. Third, and this is the uncomfortable one, a model that reasons across complete exploitation chains is a dual-use technology by definition. The same capability that finds 2,436 vulnerabilities for defenders can find them for attackers. Zhipu is running security reviews before opening the weights precisely because of this. The open weights community is about to get a decision that the closed labs never had to make publicly. How much offensive capability do you hand the world for free? None of this erases what the field results have already proven. It simply marks the distance between a claimed crown and a certified one. The vulnerabilities are real. The registry is public. The 40-year-old bugs were found. The rest is verification, and verification is coming in 2 weeks, which brings us back to the bigger picture this whole story has been building toward. Because this is not really about one model. It is about what happens when the punishment for building AI becomes the curriculum for building it better. The entity list was designed on a simple theory. Cut off the compute, and the capability stops. But GLM-5, just demonstrated a different theory. Capability does not live in the compute. It lives in the method. When you cannot buy a bigger brain, you invent a better education. When you cannot access the closed frontier's data, you build environments that generate your own. When you cannot compete on birth, you win on upbringing. And now look at the shape of the world. The strongest open coding model, by its own benchmarks, comes from a company the United States officially presumes to deny. It runs inside American agent harnesses. It found 40-year-old bugs in software the entire Western security industry maintains. And in 14 days, its weights belong to everyone. The world that ran on closed frontier models didn't announce its own ending. It just started losing ground to something sanctioned, open, and impossible to recall. So here is the question I want to leave you with, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. When a blacklisted lab can train a model that finds the bugs your entire industry missed for 4 decades, who is actually keeping the world's software safe? The closed labs that charge for the shield? Or the open model that gives the sword to everyone, defenders and attackers alike? Drop your answer below. I read every single one. And if you want a front row seat for the day those weights go open in 2 weeks, hit subscribe. The next phase of this story is going to move faster than anyone expects, and you are going to want to be here for it. I'll see you in the next one.